we're to believe the storybooks, those were the good old days when men really were brave. Then the world was inhabited by a fearless breed of men, men afraid of absolutely nothing.
That's right. Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing?
Absolute.
Practically nothing.
Yes, ever since the war began, men have been scared. The brave knights of old had those same cold beads of perspiration. Their hair stood on end. Their hands got clammy. Their hearts pounded. Their stomachs flopped and bounced. Frighten them and they got keyed up too, being normal human beings. Scare a man and automatically his fear machinery starts rolling, wakes him up all over, and prepares him to recognize the danger. Nerves go into action and wake up a couple of glands. The glands come through with a shot of adrenaline, and all hell breaks loose. But it all makes sense. Nerve cells get hopped up. You see more clearly. You hear more keenly. Muscles tense. Your body's ready to act and act fast. But to act at top speed calls for extra energy. That's where the liver comes in. This is the fuel tank. The fuel is sugar. And here's where it's stored. Getting scared gets it out. Out through the bloodstream to your muscles that need it. To get it there quicker, your heart pumps faster and you breathe harder, bringing in more oxygen to change that sugar into strength. And here we are. Scared? Yes, but ready. Ready either to get away from the danger or stay and fight with extra strength. That's the best thing about fear. You can make it work for you instead of against you.
In the summer of 1944, the Russian army drove the Germans from the Polish city of Lublin, 91 miles southeast of Warsaw. The flowers, the cheering crowds that greeted the Russian soldier in every liberated city in the long and costly fight across Poland. In the guidebooks, Lublin is described as the principal city of its province, an important commercial, industrial, and cultural center with many medieval churches and a modern university. The Germans left Lublin a city of ghosts and ruins. They had destroyed its churches, its university, its monuments, and they had tried to destroy the Polish language itself. The Russians had seen all of this before, but in one respect, Lublin was different from other Polish cities. During the enemy occupation, hundreds of civilians had been taken off the streets and imprisoned by the Germans in Lublin Castle. This is what the people of Lublin found when they came to the castle to release their friends and relatives. The workrooms of the prison, at their benches and sewing machines, the Germans had shot the prisoners in the nape of the neck and left the dead where they fell. The rest of the prisoners had been machine-gunned in the castle courtyard. Since there had been no time to cremate them in the ovens of Majdanek, there was no mystery about the number who had been killed. Two of the prisoners, mistaken for dead, lived to corroborate the dreadful evidence of the massacre. In a mass grave below the walls of their last prison, the 700 murdered of Lublin were buried. Why had they been killed, the mourners asked themselves. Why had their friends come to this end? Their only crime had been that they were a peaceable people. What kind of men were the Germans who made this wish punishable by a death so cruel and savage that Lublin will always be remembered for its graves?
One thing is sure. If there's a man in your outfit from Texas, you've heard some tall tales by now. But there's still enough facts about Texas to make it one of the doggonedest states in the Union.
700,000 men and women in uniform come from Texas. More than 10% of the state's population. They come from clusters of skyscrapers on the plains like Dallas, or Amarillo, Houston, or from a batch of little buildings on the highway like Fredericksburg. Texans have gone to war from the cattle ranches, the sheep ranches, the grain sorghum country, dairy farms, rice fields, turkey ranches, oil fields, the wheat country, the citrus country. And as the young men left the state for war, Texas began a great upheaval of nature and people to meet the emergency. Shipyards have mushroomed and drawn thousands from the country to the cities. The one-time farmer and his wife, farmer's daughter, are making everything from Navy craft to freighters. Airplane factories have drawn more thousands from the ranches and farms. So what happens? Short-handed Texas pitches in and produces more of the stuff that counts than ever before in its history. 2.5 million barrels of oil are being pumped from Texas wells every day in the year. Farmers without hired hands produced a record wheat crop of 60 million bushels in 1944 and had the winter wheat planted right on schedule. The rice growers had another record crop. Magnesium is being made from rock. And if the rock isn't handy, they're making magnesium from seawater. They pick the cotton by hand, or if they can't get help, they harvest it with a cotton picker's nightmare. Hundreds of thousands of acres of sorghum grains were harvested to feed the livestock. Helium plants continue to furnish practically all of the world's supply of this non-inflammable, lighter-than-air gas. Black clouds in the sky rise from plants where carbon black is produced by burning natural gas for the making of synthetic rubber. And in Texas plants, a great part of the nation's synthetic rubber is being manufactured. Sulfur is brought from underground by a superheated steam. The sulfur is dried in huge dumps. Trainloads of this vital mineral are shipped daily. War has turned this state into one of the great industrial areas. But the old Texas is here too. Beef cattle roam the plains until it's time to separate the calves from the herds. And finally, the cattle march that last mile in the Fort Worth stockyards. Texas sheep contribute twice as much wool as the state next in production. And the sheep, too, march that last mile in Fort Worth to help feed millions. Angora goats supply 85% of the country's mohair. Turkey raising is one of the old standbys. And that Texas climate has produced some whoppers. Baby beef turkeys, running up to 50 pounds.
Yes, Texas has done itself proud in wartime, and the people who have made this possible are simply the families of the men from Texas, the mothers and wives, and fathers and brothers. George Nicholas has a son hospitalized in New Caledonia. There are 3 men named Cooper who will recognize mother and dad at work. Millie Bailey carries on with the memory of a son captured on Corregidor. And the same for her husband, Ed Bailey. Mrs. Tom White raised her own son and 2 foster sons on this farm near Paris. All are overseas. All the kids of the Davis family help their mother pick cotton. The son is in the Navy. Raymond Malone, cotton picker, has a son in the Army overseas. Mr. Riggins' son wears the Purple Heart. Otto Stevenson has 5 brothers in the Army, Marines, and Air Corps. And John Taylor also is the only one of 6 brothers who's not in uniform. Jimmy Wingfield, engineer on the Big Inch booster pumps, has a Marine brother with the Purple Heart and another brother in the ETO. Aurel Vion, sister of a Navy man. Mrs. Lowry Deney is the wife of a GI overseas. J.O. Stockman, brother of a Navy man. J.R. Cox, switchman, with 2 sons and 3 grandsons in service. 1 son is reported missing. Mrs. H.W. McWilliams has been in war work since Corregidor fell. Her husband was taken prisoner there. And on the Alabama Coshawty Indian Reservation, out of a community population of 380, there are 28 stars in the service flag. The kids don't quite understand what's going on in the world, but they're fascinated by letters from the chief's son, PFC James Celestine of the infantry, who's been fighting an enemy in New Guinea. And the men of the reservation who remain are hard at work in the log camps.
In Austin, the State University campus is a little on the feminine side with so many men away. And at the Capitol building, as everywhere else in the state, the flag of Texas flies beside the stars and stripes. The men from Texas mean it when they say that whenever the United States goes to war, Texas can be counted on to fight right alongside her. It's hard to find a Texan who doesn't claim that his state has the most beautiful girls in the world. Here's what came out of a department store in Dallas. What's the verdict? And what kind of a knucklehead would keep a dish like this waiting? As in other states, church attendance has increased tremendously since Pearl Harbor.
Typical of Texas is the ranch of Ed C. Henke, several miles outside Kerrville. 2 sons and 2 daughters were raised here by the Henkes. But now the elder son is in the infantry overseas, and the 2 daughters are married to men who've shipped out. Whenever possible, the 2 daughters visit the ranch to help out a little. But the only regular hand Dad Henke has is his younger son, W.R. After breakfast, Dad and W.R. start the day with the milking chore. A 3rd cow is reserved for W.R.'s pride, a bull calf he's raising for the 4-H club competition. Little Charles Lee, son of the Henke boy overseas, loves to visit Grandma and Grandpa on weekends and get himself involved in everything possible. On the ranch, every day is Easter for Charlie as he tracks down the eggs with Grandma. Charles Lee insists on helping with anything, such as giving Grandpa a lift on feeding the hogs. Meanwhile, Mrs. Pressler, the Henke girl married to a field artillery man, churned some butter with a newfangled gadget that worked automatically till the motor broke and they couldn't get new parts. There's that weekly washing to be taken care of, too. Although it's far from what it used to be when all the kids were growing up, Mrs. Peters, the other Henke daughter who's married to an Air Corps man, helps her mother. And of course, Charles Lee is in there pitching. Dad and WR have regular inspection trips to be made, checking on the livestock and the fencing. And while husband and son are away, Mrs. Henke finds that, as always, everybody has forgotten to bring in some wood for the cook stove. She's tried for years to train Dad and all the kids to relieve her of this chore, but she's still doing it herself. The cattle gathering around to feed give Dad Henke a chance to check on their condition. They're in fine shape this year. The sheep, too, look in good health as they come in for salt. It took Texans a long time to convince themselves that a man of honor could raise both cattle and sheep, but the war cinched the argument. WR is anxious to have his brother see what he's accomplished with this filly. 3 weeks ago, she was as wild as a cornered bobcat. WR broke her all by himself. And Mother, with the food she put up last summer and fall, makes sure that the dried apples are in a prominent place. They won second prize at the Kerrville County Fair. When deer season opens, WR is among the first to get his buck. He'll pack it cheerfully for miles, just to see the proud flicker in Dad's eyes when he walks casually up to the house. The family is proud, too, of the way WR looks out for the son of the big brother who's overseas, showing him the mysteries of the woods and streams, and never a harsh word from him when little Charles Lee decides the best way to catch fish is to beat them over the head with your fish pole. Sunday finds the Henke family dressed in its best for morning services at Kerrville. They meet other neighbors who talk about their husbands and sons who are away, and they're led in prayer by Reverend Probst. The end of each day finds the family a pretty tired lot, but with that feeling of having worked hard and unselfishly for the common good. And Charles Lee, who hates his bedtime like any other kid and speaks with childish pride of a daddy he worships without remembering, is the best answer the Henkes have as to why the men of Texas, as the men of all states, have left their homes to make sure that the security and freedom of the American family will not be destroyed.